Okay, so this week's broadcast was sponsored by Rav David Dayan, Leo Nishmis, his uncle James Dayan, or Jimmy Dayan, who was nifter this week, and his name is Chaim ben David Dayan. Today is also the yortzeit of Rav Huna, the famous Amoyer Rav Huna. It's his yortzeit today, and he was killed al Kiddush Hashem by the Persians, and Rabbi Meimar was also killed. And it's also the yortzeit of a Yid Rav Gefner. Did anyone ever hear of Rav Gefner? He was nifter in 1988. He's actually, I know he talks about him a lot. He was friendly with him, Yosef Chaim Minzberg. Rav Gefner was the one who invented Gepner. He invented the mass Birchas Kehanim at the Kosel. It was his idea.
Oh, really?
He was the one who started that. That's what it says here.
I don't think he's a Kohen.
I don't know if he's a Kohen, but he's the one who thought of the idea.
Yeah, he went to Ner Yisrael for many years. I think throughout high school.
Wow. Oh, so he's an American.
He's from Montreal.
Yeah. Okay, so he's a Canadian. Noch besser.
Yeah, and Mintzberg was a big chassid of his.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't say this. I'm sorry, I can't say the same when he was.
David Dayan, I already announced that this week's broadcast was sponsored by Yuli Nishmas, your uncle. So we didn't forget. So let's see the Heilige Gemara. We are up to the Gemara on Daf Mem Beis Amar Aleph, about 10 lines from the top, Mei Tashmisha Shal Nachtaim, which is talking about the water that a baker uses that has particles of flour in it. He has to dump that out. He can't keep it because it'll become chametz. So the Gemara begins by saying, Tani Chada, Shoivchin b'makom medron. Where should you dump out the water? Dump it on a slope, so it shouldn't gather, it should just run away. The ain't shoivchin b'makom ha'ishbarin. You're not allowed to pour it on flat ground. And Rashi says ishbarin means lashon shvira. It's broken ground. Shemishtaber akarka. The land, even if it has cracks, if it's dry soil, it has cracks. V'yesh bekoyim. Shamayim nesofim b'shoyim b'soichan. If there's cracks or holes or indents that puddles would develop, vein of loin machmitzin. So therefore, you shouldn't pour water there because they're not going to get absorbed into the ground and they're going to become chametz. So because of that, you should spill out the water in a place where it's a mokem medron, where it's steep. And the Tanya, we learned in another brisa, you could pour it in a place where we have flat land. So the problem is we have a stira. If there's a lot of water, the kavui, it's going to gather, it's going to become a big puddle. That's when there's a problem. But if there's not a lot of water and it won't puddle, then you could pour it out even on flat ground. Rashi, if there's a lot of water, they're going to build up without getting right away absorbed into the ground. And they'll become chametz. If there's very little water, like kavu, it'll get absorbed more quickly into the ground. So we have a minute. We don't bake matzah by ourselves anymore. We have the matzah bakery bake it for us. And we know there's this famous thing called mayim shalonu. We have to use water that we mix into the matzahs that was water that we left overnight. So does anybody know what is the writing that Justin Trudeau is the MP in? Does anybody know the name of Justin Trudeau's writing?
Is it Papineau?
It's Papineau, exactly. Now, the people of Papineau have to be awfully stupid to vote someone in like Justin. Anybody else who ran must have been smarter and better. Yet the people there in that writing must be so stupid and foolish that they were able to fall for his pitch and vote for him. So we're going to see another example how the people of Papineau were not very receptive, nor were they very clever. So let's see this story. Omer Rabbi Yehuda, Isha loy solush ela b'mayim shalanu. A woman who makes matzah, and nowadays where we make matzah, you have to allow the matzah, the water, to rest overnight. So you'll draw the water in the evening and you'll let it remain overnight, and then you use it to mix with your flour to make matzah in the morning. What is the reason for this? There's 4 reasons that the Rishonim offer. Let's start with Rashi. Sholonu belayla. They have to spend over the night. Mipnei shebimei Nisan hamayanas chamin. The wells, the underground wells, the aquifers, tend to be warm in the springtime. Because the surface water is still cold because it's still the end of winter. The sun runs on the southern end of the hemisphere, and somehow the surface is cold. But the wells are warm. You fill up at night and you allow the water to remain overnight so that it should be cool. So it's interesting because according to Rashi, this would apply to water that you drew from a well. But what if you took surface water, like from a river? That should be impacted by the environment around it. That would be cold. So if that's the case, then you wouldn't need Mayim Shalom. Now, there's other Rishonim that have different pshatim as to why you need Mayim Shalom. There's another pshat that says that during the day, the well water is colder than it is during the evening where it's at night. So we want you to make sure to draw the water at the end of the day, but you shouldn't draw it at night for the matzah. So then if that's the case, you for sure wouldn't have to wait overnight. You could draw it at the right time and then you could use it right away. There's another shita that holds that the reason why you have to wait 12 hours is because when you draw water, that turbulence creates heat, and that's why you need to wait 12 hours. So then it doesn't make a difference what time of the day or night you draw it, you need to wait 12 hours. And there's a 4th shita that learns that the reason why we need Mayim Shalonu is because there's a ruach tzefonis that blows at night, and therefore you need the water to be exposed to that ruach tzefonis. The Shulchan Aruch says, no matter what, no matter when, no matter how, you always have to draw the water in the evening and use it the next morning. So we're makmor like all the shitas. However, there's a shaila. Nowadays we have refrigeration. Why can't I just take the water and put it in the fridge? So Reb Vosner was asked this question, and Reb Vosner was told that, Reb Vosner paskin, that no matter what technology we have today, we should still not be mekel, and we should still make sure to continue using Mayim Shalom. There's a very famous story where there was a chassidus, and they went to draw their Mayim Shalom from the same well that their Rebbe did tashluchim. And they said, we're happy to use our Rebbe's averis to make our matzah shel mitzvah. I'm not sure what they did about the chametz part, but I guess they assumed that the fish had already eaten up all of the bread. So let's see how these geniuses in Papineau reacted to this halacha. Now, Mayim Shalonu means water that was left overnight, but Mayim Shalonu could also mean our water. So Darsha Rav Masna bePapineau, Rav Masna gave a shir in Papineau, and he said everyone needs to use Mayim Shalonu. So they figured he was a guy like Trudeau who wants to sell them water at an increased cost and rip them off and take advantage of them like liberals like to do. And he thought, so everyone thought that they have to buy their water only from him. So the next day, he had a big line outside his house with people with jugs. They came to his home. They said, we'd like to get water from you. Because they all thought he meant Mayim Shalonu, you need to buy our water, referring to the liberal Kool-Aid. So Amar Louis said, no, that's not what I meant. I'm a conservative. I meant water from your house, but it just needs to be overnight. So you see, the people from Papineau were not very smart. They didn't chap what Rav Masna meant.
I wonder if this is where Tzvi got the idea to sell salt water.
Mayim Shalom salt water.
Exactly.
But isn't it funny that this happened in Papineau?
There is a certain sweet historical irony.
Zogt Gemara weiter. Dorish Rava. Rava Darshan. Isha loy solish bechama. She shouldn't work in the sun. She might want to stay warm, so she might want to work in a sunny area. She shouldn't do that. So gradually, it's going to warm things up, and it could lead what she's working on to become chometz. She shouldn't use water that was left out that might also be warm. Rashi says, surely not water that was warmed up in the fire. And she shouldn't even use water that came out of the chaynik, even though the chaynik is not on the fire. Rashi says, dud gadol shel nechoshes. In Eretz Yisrael, they refer to the water heater as a dude. And our dude, when I was in yeshiva, was always a cool dude. It was never a hot dude. But dude gadol shel nechoshes, v'toli al ha'or, they used to hang it on the fire, kol shah, to keep it warm. Unechushta of it had very thick metal, so therefore it retained heat. Even if there was no fire there, mayim shebeshulov, the water in the bottom of that jug, chamim oiposhin, they're warm or at least lukewarm, and therefore you shouldn't use water like that to make your matzah. And when she's working on the matzah, Rashi has extra words over here. Grufim, lashon shiraim, the bottom of the grufin is here. Grufin, even the water that you scrape out from the bottom of the mulyar, you shouldn't use. Then it says when she's working on her dough, meaning her hand should constantly be working the dough. She should never let the dough just sit and settle. Till she finishes everything and gets it right into the oven to make sure it's not chamastik. It also says shnei kelim. She needs to have 2 kelim of water because she used water as part of her process. One that she uses, Rashi says, she uses the water to glaze the each individual bread with water. But another one, Rashi says, the oishon shemikatefes bahen the water that she's using to service the dough, that water is going to get warm, and she needs to constantly dip her hands into water to keep it cool. Did anybody ever go bake matzahs in an official matzah bakery? Do they constantly cool their hands? Is there some type of keli that they use, or do they constantly wash their hands in cold water? Did anybody ever notice that?
If they have a cool dude, then maybe.
But they probably have to keep their hands cold to avoid the matzah from becoming warm. So the halacha is, these are the things that Rava said they should do, or that they should avoid. Well, what if they didn't listen?
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Darsh Rava, Isha Loisolish Becham. Didn't we say? If I remember, didn't we say you can't cook matzah in the sun? That the sun doesn't.
You're right. It wouldn't be considered lechem, but it would still warm and become chametz. So you wouldn't be yotze the mitzvah of matzah because it's not called lechem, but it could still become chametz if it's warmed.
Okay.
So Zok the Gemara iboilu over velosha. Bechamin, she was not supposed to, but she did it anyway. Does that mean all is lost? Mao Marzutra Amar Mutter, Rav Ashi Amar Asa. Marzutra said it's Mutter, and Rav Ashi said it's Asa. Amar Marzutra, Mina Minallah. Where do I get it from? That even though she didn't listen to the rule, it's still going to be Mutter. From a brisa that we're familiar with. The Tanya we learned, Ein loises in asa'ir b'Pesach. We learned before you grind barley into flour, they would soak it so that the shell will come off easy and the flour will be nice and white. So we said you're not allowed to soak it in water because it could make the grain, it could make the barley chametz. Vim losas, and if you did, it's not all lost. Nisbaku asurim, if the kernel split, then it's also that would be a sign that they're about to become chametz. But loin is baku mutarin. So here too, sure you're not supposed to. That doesn't mean it's automatically going to be chametz as long as you make sure that it didn't become chametz. Zok Rashi loin is baku mutaris. Even though you're told you're not allowed to do that. Hakanami loish not for here as well. Even though you're not supposed to knead with warm water, if we can examine it and see that it didn't become chametz, she'ein sham lo simani siur, lo simani sidur. There's no cracks nor any glazing, which we're soon going to see in the Gemara are the different indicators that dough has become chametz. For Rabashi Omar, how could you bring a raya from a completely different case? Otu kulu chada mechita mechtinu. You think everything's exactly the same? Everything's the same cloth? Hecha de itmar itmar, vechad lo itmar lo itmar. Where they said that with the Eved, you could make sure it didn't become chametz and you could still use it, there I understand. But it doesn't mean everything that you're not allowed to do automatically, if you did it, it's not going to be a problem. And therefore, I would argue that here, if you use warm water to knead the dough, it would be a problem. So Kula mariga achas. Arigasa, is it all one big cloth? Is everything cut from the same cloth? Mishum de bechade yisur de rabbanon. Just because by one yisur de rabbanon, tanem over muta bachila, boys lemeri nami bechulu, that automatically applies to every yisur de rabbanon. Rather, I would argue and say, hecha de itmar behedya, the loik and sinale itmar, where it says beferish in the brisa that you don't cancel her if she violated what she was supposed to do. Vehechad lo itmar, where Chazal didn't tell us, where the Rabbanan didn't tell us that even if you did the wrong thing, it's still going to be okay. Lo yitmar. Vehilchach over v'losher b'chamin, karoi v'lamezid haisa. That's near to a mezid. The usher, and the dough will be usher. We already learned earlier that you can actually examine dough that comes from a goy to see if it's chametz. So if we can examine it, why over here do we not examine it and see if it was chametz or not, even according to Rabashi? The over derbanan, we actually cancel her. So I'll call upon them. I should say, just because in one place they decided to cancel her, it doesn't mean in the other place they would cancel her as well. So we finished a beautiful, beautiful parak, and now we're getting in to a new parak of Elu Ervin, which at least at the beginning, for the first blood, I can tell you that it discusses Taruvas chametz. We know if you have chametz be'en, if you have a piece of bread, that's chametz, and you're over on Bal Yorah, Bal Yimatzeh, and if you eat it on Pesach, Chayav Koros. On the other hand, if you have Taruvas chametz, you have a dish that chametz is mixed into, that might have different halachas. We're going to discuss whether or not there's a lav of Bal Yorah, Bal Yimatzeh. And then there's something called chametz nuksha, which is chametz that's not really pristine anymore. It's something that you wouldn't want to eat. It's not nifsal me'achilas kelev, but it's definitely not appetizing. And the Mishnah is going to be discussing what is the status of these on Pesach. The Elu Oivrin bePesach. Now Rashi learns what does Elu Oivrin means. Oivrin alein bebal yirah ubal yimatzeh. Not everybody learns that way in the Rishonim, but Rashi learns the shaylas on these items you're going to be over bal yirah bal yimatzeh. V'chulu mefarshlu beGemara zeisim v'zoymen v'kulan v'amila. The Gemara is going to explain what all these things are, and we're going to learn today one of the most important lessons. I believe that today we're going to learn, I think, what would be my favorite Gemara about what's really healthy and what's not. All of the medical establishment, when they tell you what's healthy and what's not, they're just trying to torture you and forcing you to eat your veggies. But we're going to see from the Gemara what's really healthy and what's really geschmack. And if we follow the Gemara, we'll be able to be very healthy. So we'll see what the Gemara says. This will be very, very exciting. Zokt Heilige Gemara. So what are the items on which you would be over by Rabbi Yimatzeh? Kutach habavli. Kutach was a dish that was used as a condiment. You dip things into it. It had in it milchiks. It had some whey, which is like the leftover after the fat's taken out of the milk. It had vinegar. It had breadcrumbs, spoiled breadcrumbs, and it was a dish that they used to, I think, dip into. V'sheich Hamadi was beer from Madi, and Gemara is going to tell us that in those days they made most of their beer out of dates, non-chametz beer, but in Madi they made their beer like we do out of barley. V'chometz adomi, this was vinegar from Edom, and the Gemara is going to explain where that came from. V'zeisim amitzri, and zeisim, we'll see what that is. That was Egyptian. So it's interesting, and the Gemara is going to talk about this soon, is that the first four items are geographically identified. Kutach habavli, shecher amodi, chometz hadoimi, and zeisam hamitzri. So the first four items are geographically identified. Then we have some things that are identified by their trades. V'zoyim shel tzavoyim, It was some type of liquid that they used to dye things. It was a reddish type of dye. The was a dough that they would put on top of pots that would suck out the zuhama, the bad foul smell. So that again, it was a trade. Not bakers, so professional cooks would use it. The kulan shel soifrim, and there was a glue that people who made hide or soifrim would use to glue their hides together. So the first four are geographically identified, and the last three are identified by trade. So Zok Tehillah Gemara. I'm just going to ask if anybody's on here who's not looking for this year and is looking for Rabbi Weisbrod's year, let me know, and I will transfer you into the room where Rabbi Weisbrod will soon say shir. He didn't check in yet. And if you want to go to a completely different shir, not Rabbi Weisbrod's and not this, then you can speak up and we can try to point you in the right direction. So Zok the Gemara weiter. Tanu Rabbanon. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in the middle of a Mishnah. Rabbi Lezer Eimer, Aftach Shitei Noshim. Jewelry as well, which is going to be schwer because jewelry is something that cannot be chametz. So we'll see that soon. Zaklal, the rule is, Kol Shehumi Min Dagon, anything that comes from grain, Hareze Over B'Pesach, you will be over. Harelu B'Azar, there's only a lav on them, Ve'ein Behem Mishum Kares, but there is no Chiyuv Kares. So we're talking about two types of chametz. Many of these are good chametz. They're just in a mixture. And some of them are chametz that are already things that you wouldn't want to be eating. Because the Gemara is going to end up explaining that tachshitei noshim is certain powders that they use to take your hair off, like a waxing solution. So they're not going to be very appetizing to eat. They're not nishal mechilas kelav, but you definitely wouldn't order them up at our restaurant. So Zok Tehillah Gemara weiter. Tanur Rabbanon. Shloisha devarim ne'emarim b'kudach habavli. If anyone ever wanted to go buy cigarettes, when you buy the cigarettes, there's a very nauseating picture of deteriorated lungs, and there's a big warning the Surgeon General warns. So when you used to go buy kutach in the store, there would also be these warnings would be the Surgeon General warns the following things. Shloisha devarim ne'emarim b'kudach habavli. Eiz metamtem esalev. It blocks your heart. I thought that means you can't think straight. But now that I'm at the age where I know what blocked arteries are, I'm not so sure what pshat metamtem esalev means anymore. Umesames einaim, it impacts someone's eyesight. Umaklish esaguf, and it generally lowers your energy level. That's what the Surgeon General warns about kudach habavli. Metamtem esalev, but they still allow you to buy it because they make tax money on it. Metamtem esalev, why does it do that? Because it has in it the whey, which is after you take the fat out of the milk, that whey there, and that, I guess, causes timtum aleif. It's very high in cholesterol. It blinds you, mishum milcha. We learned that melach sadoimis, salt, could blind somebody. That's one of the reasons why we wash mayim achronim, to get any melach sadoimis off our hands, because if it's on our hands and we touch our eye, it will damage our eyesight. So kutach is full of this melach sadoimis, and therefore you're going to end up touching your eyes, and because unless you wear a face shield, but then you can't get into your mouth, and that will cause blindness.
There's other reasons for washing your hands after eating.
That's right, but one of the reasons the Gemara gives is because of melach sadoimis.
Okay.
So the Gemara goes back to umaklish esaguf. How does it make you weak? Mishum kumnisa to uma. So let's see what Rashi says. Metamtem loshen stima. Mesames enaim mishum milcha. Melach sadoimis yesh. Shemesames enaim. There are certain salts that blind you. Kishenegeh b'melach v'choyzer v'negeh b'ayin. Neshuv v'dechalbo is mishka. Kumnisa to uma is ipusha. It's the rotten breadcrumbs that are mixed into the kutach. Pash shemes apish la'achar zman b'sachar kutach. When they put the breadcrumbs in, kutach lasts a long time. We learned in the last parak that it was a shayla if you're allowed to sell kutach tagoy, because it lasts a very long time. So you have this kutach with your breadcrumbs in it that become moldy, and that causes you to get, eating moldy food causes you to get weak.
You know, penicillin was discovered from moldy bread.
That's right.
So it does.
It has benefits too. Yeah, that's why people might eat the kutach.
That's the
it still has the warnings on it. Zok the Gemara, I guess when they used to buy Kutach penicillin those days, there'd be warnings. Side effects. If you experience these side effects, consult your doctor. Weakness, blocked hearts, blindness, stop using this medicine and contact your doctor immediately. Tadar Abodim. Gimel Devarim, Marbin Hazevel. 3 things make you be more regular, which in our world is a blessing, but in their world it was a negative, probably because they didn't have cottonelle and flush toilets. So to them, anytime they had to go to the bathroom, it wasn't a very pleasant experience, and they didn't have smartphones or magazines either, for that matter. So it was a big deal. So Zok to Gemara, there's 3 things that cause Marbin Hazevel, the koifiness of koima, they make you lean over. And Rashi says, they make you weak. And the last problem that they do is the noitlin echad v'chamesh meyos mimor eno shel adam. And they actually weaken someone's eyesight by 1 part in 500. So Zok to Gemara, Elohein, pas kibur. Pas kibur is whole wheat bread, which today is more expensive. But in those days, it was considered bad. We do know that it does help you become a regular. V'shecher chodesh, and fresh beer. The Yerkai, fresh veggies. Who would think that fresh veggies are not healthy? But Dr. Rashi, not all fresh veggies. And it all depends on how many you eat. The Yerkai on krishim is cress, betzelem are onions, the chazarin and the radishes, if you eat too much, everything in moderation. If you overeat these, it will cause you these problems. And now we're going to get up to my favorite Gemara in all the world. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Tanu Rabbanon. Shloisha Devarim Meitnes Hazevel. There are 3 items that are so good for you that they reduce your discharge. The Zoiktunis HaKoyim, they make you strong, that you could stand up proud and tall. Ume'irnis Hainayim, and they give you great eyesight. And what are they? Eloheim Pasnikia, Geshmaka white bread, Basar Shemin, fatty meat. So a Geshmaka steak on rye, the Yain Yoshan, and a Geshmaka cold beer, or a Geshmaka bottle of wine. So you see, this is the ultimate in health. So the next time you go to Kosher D, you tell your wife, I want to go to a healthy restaurant because I have to be careful with my health. And you go order yourself a cheshmaka, festa, fatty steak sandwich with wine, and you say, now I feel better. I can see better. My stomach is better. I'm healthier. I'm stronger. This is gewaltig. Zok to Gemara.
We probably don't hold like that.
Like what?
Like those are bottom.
You don't pass like this, Brysa.
No, that's it.
Well, the truth is, the problem is the Gemara doesn't say what the serving size is. So it's very possible these are very healthy, just not at our supersized serving sizes. Maybe like a bite of each one would be okay. So what is it? Pas Nikida means the smida. It means it's made out of Rasha's soilas, white bread. Basar shamein, again, which is not what we eat. Basar shamein is the tzvir todolai aftach. Rashi says it means A's, it's from a goat, shaloi that never gave birth. So we eat beef. We eat beef from a bull. If we ate goat meat that never gave birth, maybe that would be better. So much for kosher delight. In Yain Yoshan, it has to be Atak Atiki. Rashi says it has to be Yoshan Shal Shaloshanim. It's got to be 3 years old. Now, you might think that it has side effects. You know, there's some good things about our side effects. We're going to see this is the ultimate and good, no negative side effects whatsoever. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Kol Mila Demaili Lahai Kosher Lahai. In most cases, if you have a remedy that's good for one thing, it's always going to have a negative side effect. With the Kosher Lahai, Mal Lahai. Bar, the only thing that are wonder drugs that are only good, that have no negative side effects, are Zangvila Retiva, moist, wet, fresh ginger, Upilpali Erichta, and long peppers. But look at this. Upas Nikia, Ubasar Shomen, V'yayin Shon, V'yayin Yoshon. Not only are they good, they have 0 negative side effects. The Mali L'chula Gufe. This is like a Shemaki Gemara. That was my problem all these years. I didn't know the Gemara. Now I know the Gemara. Zok the Gemara called the Mali L'chayli Zeh, Kosher L'zeh. Hamoy L'leiv, Kosher L'nayim. Oil Echad Mitach L'yishayavorm. If it's good for your heart, it's going to be bad for your eyes. You can't find a wonder drug except for Zanvila. Zinjibra, I think the article says that's ginger, and therefore, these things are good for everything.
Yeah, so I think this Brisa was the Mechaber of the Brisa probably had the patent on the pills for
cholesterol.
No, what's the thing? Gout.
Gout. Yeah, could be. Okay. Zog the Gemara weiter. Zog the Gemara weiter. Shecher Hamadai. Shecher from Madai. Madai is India, I think. Zog the Gemara, what's unique about it? The Romim Bay Mesairi, they throw into it the water that they soak barley.
Meads.
Where's
Madai
that?
Paras and Madai. So Madai was part of really the Persian Empire, but separate. There's like a different province, and they.
So where would that be in today's geography?
I think it's northern Iran.
Northern Iran. Okay. Okay, so let's see what it says over here.
I'm not sure actually.
Okay, the Ram Beisari Shematil Nasoicha Meisarin. They put in water that they soaked barley in, similar to our beer. It's made there in Madai. In those days, in most of the world, they made beer out of dates, which was non-chametz. Like we do nowadays. Okay, what about chametz hadomi? This is fascinating. The shadu beisari, they would throw barley into the wine to act as an enzyme to make the wine become vinegar. Amar Rab Nachman, when they used to bring wine for the Beis Hamikdash from Yehuda, the grapes that grew in the Yehuda region were so high quality and so robust, the wine you made out of them never became vinegar and never turned sour. It was remarkable. If they wanted vinegar, they actually had to put an enzyme in to cause it to go sour so that they can have vinegar. They had to put sour in it. But you and then it was called vinegar. However, nowadays that we lost our Beis Hamikdash and we lost our glory, this advantage went to Amalek. The wine of Edom is so robust, it doesn't become vinegar. And now they don't just call it plain chametz, they call it chametz adomi to remind us that we don't have it anymore. Edom has it. Unfortunately, I don't have a good Gemara with the psukim on the side, but the pasuk is talking about Sur, which was a city of Edom that was saying that we're going to raid Yerushalayim and we're going to become full from their ruins. And we dash in the Malay Zu, Charvazu, when the Jews are on top, the Goyim are on Edom's at the bottom, the Malay Zu, Charvazu. Which is what Shem told Rivka, that your two sons, one's going to be up, one's going to be down, they're never going to be both down, or never going to be both up. So Rashi the Shadu Besari, Biyayin, Noistin Sorin Shleimim, they would put in complete barley kernels, Kedei Lachmitza, it acted as an enzyme. They had very good wine. Unless you did something to force it to become vinegar, it would not become vinegar. So what created this tremendous quality of grapes? It says Rashi, the schus on the sochem. But now Nebuch, we lost it, and now Amalek has it. Amalek Hareva, Reisha the Kra is Yan Omrat Tsuri Yerushalayim. Tsur told Yerushalayim, Hach Esmale min Churbana Shel Yerushalayim. I will become filled with the destruction of Yerushalayim. V'Tsur me'edomi, and Tsur is from Edom. Ulay milam yamatz kisha Esav Gibar Yaakov Cholosh, meaning Ein Malchus Shnei Miskayim Yachad. They'll never both be on top.
I'm not following so these barley seeds that were put into the wine, they can't is the Gemara saying they can't
no,
possibly
the wine, we're talking about the quality of their wine. They had very high quality grapes. So the wine would never turn into vinegar. So if they wanted vinegar, normally people who want vinegar, they just wait till their wine goes sour. But this wine was so good, it never went sour. So they actually had to put barley in it to make it sour.
So to make it sour.
So therefore, if you have vinegar from Edom, you can assume they put barley into it.
So therefore, it should become chametz.
Right. That's why the Gemara calls it chametz. One of the examples of Teru's chametz is.
I thought it said it's not chametz.
No, chametz adomi says the elu ovrin. You're over on Bal Yirah with chametz adomi.
The elu ovrim. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I misread it. Okay, sorry.
Because what the hell Gemara about Tanya? Rabbi Yehuda said Yehuda, in Yehuda, B'Rishoina Halakeach Chometz Mi Am Haaretz. It used to be that if you bought vinegar from an Am Haaretz, Einei Tzarich La'aser, you didn't need to take Meiser, because without any doubt, there was no grape content in it, and if there was grape content in it, then it would be subject to Trumas and Meisers. But there was for sure no grape content in it. Why? We're only soaking it in seeds, and the flavor that the seeds put into it don't have a status of grapes, and therefore would not be covered by the Isurim of Teva. But the Achshov, nowadays, Halakech Chometz Me'am Haaretz Tzarich La'aser. Now, if you buy Chometz Me'am Haaretz, you have to take a Meiser. Shecheskasai Einei Ba Elo Min HaYayin. Now we know it comes from Yayin. Zokt Gemara, V'Sabar Rabbi Yehuda, Temed Lav Bar Isuriu. Does Rabbi Yehuda hold that if it comes from Temed, if the vinegar comes from Temed, which was the extract of seeds, you don't have to take seeds or the shmorim, you don't have to take off Meiser? But now we learned, Hamatamed V'Nosan Mayim B'Mida. So you wanted to make Temed. Temed is you take these seeds and these shells or the peel of the grape that have nothing left in them, and you pour water into them to get the water to absorb some little bit of flavor. So if you did that, and you put in, let's say, a gallon of water into the mix, and then you poured out a gallon of water, meaning you have exactly what you put in, not a drop more. So obviously, no extract from the seeds or from the peels could have got in there, because otherwise there would be an increase in volume. So therefore, potter, you're going to be potter for Meiser, because clearly the water that you put in is the water that you took out. But Rabbi Yehuda Machayev. So clearly you see Rabbi Yehuda holds that we do say that there's a chiyuv of Meisers from Temed. So if that's the case, why did the Brisa say earlier that Rabbi Yehuda said Rabbi Yehuda holds even if it comes from Temed, there's a chiyuv to take Meisers. So let's see Rashi. Temed Bupet. Bupet is a game that came out about 10 years ago called Buffet, and a machine tells you to squeeze and to bang certain things. So that's, I guess, if you drink enough Temed, you're encouraged to play Buffet. Levisha Yain Hoya Toiv, they had really good wine, Ve'ene Machmets, and it never became vinegar. Therefore, Estam Chaymit Shalahem Min Temed Hoyaba. They never had vinegar that came from wine, because their wine, like we said earlier, was very robust and never went bad. So how did they have vinegar? They must have, after they squeezed the wine out, they just had the leftover peels, the leftover seeds. That's what they made the chometz of, and that chometz would not be subject to trumas and meises. But the achshav bottle tama yain m'mayla hachmetz, and wine becomes chometz. So therefore, when you buy vinegar, the likelihood is that this was once wine. And therefore, potter mila'aser sharei enkan elamayim. So in the case where you put water into seeds and shells, and you took out the same amount of water that you put in, you don't have to take off meiser. You put in a gallon of water, you pulled out a gallon. So clearly you didn't take anything out of, no extract came out of these seeds or out of these shells, out of the peels. Even though it did absorb some taste, we'll say, just a flavor of pears. The ayil bay, they went into the wine, but not enough to make any type of isser. Rabbi Yehuda Machayev, the ozol basar chazuz of a taima. He holds that you look at the chazuz of a taima, and therefore, if it has a tinge of redness of the grape, and it tastes a little bit like the grape, you're going to be chayiv. So how is it that Rabbi Yehuda said earlier you're not chayiv? Zok Gemara hachik amar. Lo nechshedu amaya aretz ala tenet. We're not. All Rabbi Yehuda said before is if you buy it from an Amma Aretz, you don't have to take off meiser. So at first we thought it's because it's not mechuyev in meiser. Now the Gemara is saying no, it is mechuyev in meiser, but we don't have to worry that the Amma Aretz didn't take off the meiser, because normally we're choshed that the Amma Aretz didn't take off trumas and meisers because it costs him too much money. But temet is so invaluable. So not valuable. It has such a low value to it that we're not concerned that the Amma Aretz would not have taken off meiser. So but avad temet would be mechuyev in meisers. It's just that we're not worried that the Amma Aretz wouldn't have done it. You cannot trust him, and you need to be concerned about temet. It depends on what they soaked in the water. if they soak the peels in the water, those are subject to Trumas and Maisris. And that's what the second Bryce is talking about. The first Bryce that says there's no Chiv Trumas and Maisris is if they soaked only the seeds in the water. And the seeds do not have any Chiv Maisris. Zokt Rashi, Hachi Gomer, Masniza Kamaisa, where it says Loy Nechshedu Amayorish Mila Asher Satemed. Not because it's not Mochiv in Maisris, Zokt Rashi, Lufishene Choshev Benem. It doesn't have much value. Because you can assume that he probably took off the Maisris. You cannot trust him. He holds that this type of temed is potter from Meiser, even if you know for sure that there was no Meiser taken off. Because of the temed, the porchini kamar. He's talking about the temed that you make out of porchini, which means you soak the seeds in water, and that would cause it to ferment. That water that absorbed whatever it absorbed from the seeds would eventually ferment and cook up like it does when it ferments. Kiyayna toisus, like wine that's fermenting. Behind temed, that is what temed is. But less the paver. It only has a little bit of a taste in it, a little bit of its flavoring, not enough to create a chiv maishus. Father in the Bryce later on that said Rabbi Yehuda holds that temed is chayiv take maishus. It's b'dervaka. We're soaking the squeezed out pieces of grape. That's what we're soaking in water. That's where you'd be mechuyev on Trumas and Maisris. You might ask, I don't have any extract from the grape because I put in a gallon of water and I'm taking out a gallon of temed. So I'm taking out exactly what I put in. Clearly, there's no input here from the grape. There is wine from the shmorim extract that came into your water, which will be mechayven in ma'aser. How come we don't have increased volume? Because there's probably some water that got absorbed into the shmorim when the shmorim gave out, when the shmorim secreted some of its juice, and therefore, even though you're taking out the same amount of liquid that you put in, now it has a different content. Now it has the content of grapes. And therefore, it's mechuyev in maishus. Zok more about it. Zeisum amitri. My zeisum amitri. What is zeisum amitri? Tanya Rabbi Yosef. It's a concoction that's made out of 3 parts. Tolsa sari. It's a third barley. Tolsa kurtumi. It's a third. Kurtumi is Marika Krug. It means the article says what it is.
Saffron.
What it says. Saffron, right? Okay, I'm not sure what that is, but at least it's a word I recognize. And Tulsa Milchan is a third salt. Rapapa Mapik Sari Umayachiti. Rapapa said it didn't have barley, rather it had wheat. How am I going to know who said barley and who said wheat? So Sisni. Sisni is a word that has 2 samachs in it. So Rabbi Yosef has a letter samach in it, and Sari has a samach sound. So Sisni will tell you that the 2 samachs stay together. That's one shot. Rashi had another shot that it was some type of keli that was called a sisni, and if you use this keli, if you remember that keli, you'll remember the 2 samachs. Anyway, Tori lahu, you soak it. You soak these 3 things together. V'kalu, then you roast it. V'tachlan, you grind it. So it sounds like it becomes a powder. V'shosilu, and you drink it. Now, how do you drink it if it's a powder? So you probably mix it into water, and then it becomes a liquid again. And now, this is unbelievable. This is an incredible medicine. You drink it between Pesach and Shavuos. From Pesach to Shavuos is an important time. The Mefarshim speak out. The Arshko speaks out that it was the Gemara says that was a time where a lot of refuahs worked. Now, what does it do for you? This wonderful Zeishim Mitri. The comet, if you finish Pesach and you're constipated, surprise, Marpele, it loosens you up a little bit. Udarafi, this is an unbelievable drug. Udarafi, if you have loose bowels, mekamatli, it'll harden your bowels. So it does 2 things that are exactly the opposite, depending on your condition. However, it's very dangerous for someone who's already sick or one who's expecting to eat it, because if it ends up loosening their bowels, they can die of dehydration, and therefore it should only be eaten by healthy people who either are constipated or have loose bowels. This is this broth that these people who dyed clothing, what they used to use. Hacha over here, targimu mai de chivri. It's water that they soak bran in, so I guess it has a reddish brownish color. The chababilba, they dye clothing. Some people are gers lecha with a chaf, but I believe it means the same thing. Zog the Gemara vayta. What's that? It's pastvua. It's the bread made out of a grain. They didn't grow yet a third. You would put this bread on top of a pot for and it would absorb all of the zuhama, the bad stuff in the pot. The koilin shel sofer. What is this koilin shel sofer? Hocha targuma peruda de ushkafi. Here they typed it as peruda de ushkafi, which means it was a glue that had flour content in it. All right, we'll see Rashi glued. The people who made straps, they would use it to glue together the hide, if it's split, or if they wanted very thick leather, they would glue together 2 layers of leather to make it extra thick. They would use the flour of shifon. Shifon, I believe, is rye. I believe we learned shifon was rye. It's either rye or spelt, but I think it's rye. Ulakamei mefarish my shel sofer. Why is it called shel sofer? It should be of people who are tanners, not sofer people who write books. So the Gemara is going to deal with that. Zok Gemara vayter Rab Simi Mechuzno Amar. Rab Simi of Chuzno said, "Zeti pulon shel benois ashirim shemishayris oisai lebenois aniyim." This was a certain type of powder paste that would be used by women for hair removal, and if they had extra, they would leave it over for the poor girls. A very interesting way of saying it. So Rashi says, "Tipulum shel benois ashirim." It was made out of soilus, out of flour. They would leave over some extra of this flour powder that they used. For the children of Malamdim, because the children of Malamdim are poor. I guess it's an old problem that Malamdim don't get paid enough. They're poor. So Rashi, why didn't it just say the people of the B'nai Saniyim? Why did it say the people that's left over from the Shirim to the Aniyim? Just say the Aniyim. The Aniyas ain't lam soilus. The Aniyas cannot even afford flour to do this hair removal. Elasid, they went to Home Depot and they bought drywall compound to remove their hair. Tipo lashon metapel, it's a lashon of a paste. Umadik oisoi dover, oisid, oisoiles. They put this paste on, either it's a paper mache paste or it's a Home Depot drywall compound paste. Al basaran lahasher asar. Baruch shalei shani isha. What they have to do to beautify themselves. So that's what it was. So it had again chometz in it, chometz noksha. Now I just want to tell you something. You think that they used it and they pulled their hair off and then they threw it in the garbage. We're going to soon see that they actually reused it with the hair mixed into it, which gets a little bit gross, but it's going to be very relevant soon. Zog to Gemara. How could you say, thank you, Mami, how could you say that this last thing is something that women use? For Tanur Reb Chiya, this is what I refer to when we learned the Mishnah, Arba Mine Medina, the list of chametz that our Mishnah is talking about are 4 geographical, like we discussed, Bovel, Modai, right? Edom, Ushloishim and Umnis, and 3 type of trades, right? We talked about the Zoyim Shel Tzavoyim, and we talked about the Amol Shel Tavachim. If this V'amar Tipul Shel B'nai Hashirin, if you're talking about this type of paste, my mine umnisika, what type of umnis is there? They obviously didn't have beauty parlors in those days where they would be beauticians who did this, because then it would also be a mine umnis. In those days, everyone must have done it on their own. So vektamor velamai peruda ushkavi. So you want to go back to your first shot and say that it means this glue that they glued high together? Well, then my korelei high koilin shel soifrim. Why is it called koilin shel soifrim? What does it have to do with the soifer? Koilin shel ratzonim mibayile. It should have been called the glue of a person who makes straps. Amar Boishi ala olam perur doshkafi. Umay karle koilin shel soifrim. Why are they called koilin shel soifrim? The soifrim nami medapkin buna yaresein. Soifrim also, if they have to glue pages together, they'll use this glue as well. And therefore, it refers to a trade. So we have a machloikis. If koilin shel soifrim is the tipulan of b'nois hashirim, or if it's a glue. So let's look at the next
Yosy,
part of the Mishnah.
Yes,
Yes.
before they had shavers, they
Right?
used to have, before they had shavers,
Right?
they had a powder that you put on your face to take off the hair from your face.
I guess that's what the idea of this was as well.
I remember it.
I remember in yeshiva the boys who came from very frum homes where they didn't allow any shavers. There was a shaila of giluach. They used to use powder. There were guys who used powder.
Yeah,
I remember
stunk
that also.
terribly.
It smelled, right?
Yeah, it sure
Yeah,
smelled. And the cook
terribly.
would always ask, when you finish with it, just give it to me. I'll throw it into the cholent.
And they would
Yeah.
use a cartise to scrape it off.
Yeah,
your
they
face.
use it as credit card. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Zok Gemara Vatra. Beliezer Omer at tachshit enoshim. Zok Gemara tachshit enoshim. Solkadaitach. Tachshit enoshim solkadaitach. You think it means jewelry? How is there any chametz in jewelry? Elaema afti pule noshim. It means this paste. Frek toisvis. If the Gemara is saying a second later that tachshit enoshim means this paste, how in the world is it possible that Reb Shimi Michuz Noah wanted to suggest that this is paste? How could it Mishnah talk about the same thing twice? Zok Toisvis is really getting into the nitty gritty of women's beauty aids. Zok Toisvis, the pull Mishnah Nois Hashir. Im timer effect Toisvis. Im Kain Hani Tachshit Enoshim. That's the same thing that the Gemara says a second later is another item listed in the Mishnah. For Tirta read Orleans, it makes sense. Orleans was in France. In French, they probably knew these things. Tahacha Mairi Bepanim Shalmaila. Here we're talking about a lower growth factor, because what hair are we removing with the paste that we're talking about up here is facial hair. The leimois kolkach, kishetayfin al paneim. That's not such a gross factor. For the achshit enoshim that we're discussing now, hani bepanim shalmata, that's the hair south of the equator. Shetayflin lahasir asar the moistvei, that has a much higher growth factor, and even that the Gemara is saying, the Mishnah is saying, has a lav of bal yirah. That's chumas nuksha. So let's see the Gemara. B'nois Yisrael, girls, shegiu. Oh, this is not good. Shegiu lepirkon. They reached puberty and they started showing hair, but v'loigiu l'shanim. But they're not of age yet. So Rashi says they're embarrassed that they have hair when they're too young to have hair. So what do? They get rid of it. The wealthy girls. So the poor girls who use sid, they go to Home Depot and they buy drywall compound. They use flour. Like we saw in the Megillah, my Shemin Hamar, Ravuna Bar Yirmi Omer, Sateches. Rashi says, I don't know what it is, but the Art Scroll says that from somewhere else that it means balsam. Rabbi Yirmi Bar Abba Omar, Shemin Zayish Shaloi Hevi Shlish. It's the oil of olives that didn't grow more than a third, and that oil, I guess, takes off hair. Tanya Rabbi Omer, and Pekin is Shemin Zayish Shaloi Hevi Shlish. Why in the world do we use it? Do people use it? It takes off hair, and it gives the skin a very healthy glow, and that's why people use it. And I guess we could stop here.
Shkoyach.
So we're getting into much easier